use them to read with here this evening. But Maria, thank you so much. I went a few weeks ago to try and find some, and 1.25 was like the smallest, the lowest one that they had. So I can see fairly well, and hopefully those will help. Honestly, with reading in the evening and stuff, that'll help help a lot with it. I thought when I put them on, you all would just talk about how devastatingly handsome I was, but I guess y'all gonna save that till the end. I get it. We don't want to say it right now. I completely understand. Before we get started, Will is not here. Mary's not here. I got two things to tell you. One, this week at Garrett County High School is homecoming. And for the first time in at least 15 and maybe even longer than that years, they are having a powder puff football game. Some of y'all may know what it is. Some of you may not. But essentially, it's girls playing football. So there's a freshman class, sophomore, junior, and senior team. It was supposed to be all on first of it Friday morning and then the rest of it Friday afternoon, but it got changed. Your son, my son, not your son, but Will had signed up to be the coach of the freshman team. And when it got moved to tonight, so he is coaching the freshman team, and Mary is watching. As part of the homecoming week, today was flipped. The teachers could dress like students, and the students dress like teachers. So I wore shorts today for school, and then but Will wore khakis and dress shoes in a sort of quarter zip Garrett football shirt. He wore his coaching outfit, essentially. It's what he wore today. It looked good. But there was a little girl on my tennis team, and she had told me yesterday, she had said something about a ball cap yesterday. And I thought, she's going to dress, baseball cap. So she comes. No, I was not hearing her right. She was saying a bald cap. So she comes in with a pair of khaki shorts, a Garrett tennis shirt, and a covering over her long blonde hair that made her look completely bald. So we got our picture taken together as well. So I did laugh, but she don't get to play the first match. But anyway, I'm just kidding. It was good, but it's been a wild week. I told we had tennis practice after school today, and I said last week we had revival. They're always long weeks. And this week, everything at school has been completely out of whack, and it's a long week for that as well. But I'm glad to participate, glad the kids have fun with it. Tonight, we're going to talk about scouting out the promised land. If you weren't here on Sunday morning, I ended up teaching what should have been tonight's class on Sunday morning because Ben was a little bit down and out. So we talked on lesson 6. We talked on Sunday morning about Moses and Miriam and Aaron. And so tonight we're going to talk about scouting out the promised land. And to be quite honest with you, here in the last, 3-4 months, we've had a sermon that dealt with Caleb, and we've had a sermon that dealt with Joshua. So y'all ought to know all the answers to what we're going to talk about here this evening. But I want to ask you the first question here to start with, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you more likely, and this question maybe is pre Google Maps, but are you more likely to stop and ask directions, or if you are lost, or drive around until you find your way? Depends on that. It is not the question that I asked at all, Sue Ann. We're not engendering the question. We are simply wanting to know yes or no. Which one? Which one of these? So, well, all right. Stop and ask for directions, Sue Ann has said. Okay. See? It's not a male-female thing. It's a stubbornness thing is what it is. How lost are we? When you drive past that person for the third time, you better stop and ask, right? Men don't use friends like this. Who needs enemies here tonight? It really wasn't. I did not ask this question for y'all to pick on me here. Jimmy, what about you? Would you stop and ask? Stop and ask? Plenty of plans. We've done it plenty of times. Honestly, things like this, things like Google Maps and those kinds of things on your phone have rendered a lot of this really difficult or really maybe unnecessary. I was thinking about this summer, Will and I went down to Atlanta to a Braves game, and we went to a couple of different places in downtown Atlanta. Unfortunately, it was July 4th, so it was a holiday, and there wasn't a ton of like business action going on. But I was thinking back to when I was young, and I would hold the map, and I would tell Dad, like, you got to go here and turn right, and you turn left again, and you would look at that and try to figure it out. And some streets were on a map, and some streets weren't. And now, it says go past this light and then turn at the next one. And so it renders a lot of that unnecessary. I do think in some ways that's a negative, because I think we stop looking for landmarks now that we used to perhaps did. But the question leads us into what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight with the Israelites. But some things to think about. First of all, is that God's promises require faith on our part, and we're applying this both to the Israelites and to ourselves. And so we need that as well. Majority opinion isn't always right. We'll see that with the scouts as they come back in. But a lot of times, 2 or 3 people say it, and we just go along with it. Maybe we know better, or maybe we don't know any better. We've just chosen not to try and find what the answer is. And then I think we'll see that the failure to trust is both a warning and a spiritual lesson for us today. And the failure to trust is something that comes up in every one of these lessons. Like it is the recurring theme that goes through all of them. So tonight we're going to be in the book of Numbers, chapter 13 and 14. There are some somewhat lengthier readings tonight rather than what was on Sunday, which was fairly short. So if you'll bear with us as we read through this evening, and then we'll discuss it as we go. Boo, I'm going to have you start if you don't mind. This is Numbers 13, 26 through 33. All right. So first of all, they send them out on this mission. They send out these spies. How many of them do you remember how many there were? There were 12, and one of each that represents each of the 12 tribes. And you can go back and look at that there before in Numbers chapter 13, I believe. That they come back with sort of a good news, bad news situation. Good news first. They come back after they've been gone for 40 days. They come back and they acknowledge that the land was good. They described it as what? What was the descriptor? Flowing with milk and honey. Funny how some things stay in the vocabulary, right? Those are still terms that are used even to this day. And so they come back and they say, good news, this land is well worth it. Now, had they come back and said, look, this land is just junky. It's all rock and stone. There ain't no grass. There's no food. There's nothing. Had they come back and said that, there would have been no need. People would have said, well, there's really no need to go take it. But they come back and they said, this is good land. Good news. Now, bad news. They also emphasize the strength of the people. I think it's important for us to look here too. I don't know why, maybe it's just me, but there's this sort of Canaan land idea that there's this group of people there and nobody else. But as Boo read, there's all sorts of different groups that are there. And so they come back talking about these different groups, the Amalekites and the Hittites and the Jebusites and all these different groups who undoubtedly at times would have been allies and at times probably would have fought against each other as well. But this outside group that's coming in comes in to see them. And they come back and they talk about the strength of the people. There's a lot of them. They talk about fortified cities. These are not places you're just going to walk in and take over. They talk about the size of the people. I have no idea what the word giant here means. Everything that I've ever read, it can be one of two things. One, people are really tall. I think maybe it's a slight exaggeration of the group of people that they're going against, saying, look, like these people, this is a big group. It doesn't really matter. But it seems like, and I say that because they're going to get into some excuse making here as they go. But nonetheless, there is this sort of belief amongst the spies that they couldn't take it, with two exceptions. So what we see here is a majority that says we can't do this. 10 out of 12, 83.33 to infinity percent says we cannot take it. But two people have a different opinion. Two people have something different. So I want you to think about this before we get any further. Why do you think the people focus more on the obstacles to taking the land rather than God's promise, which has been repeated over and over again, that he was with them? Sometimes we want to see the bad before the good. True. Oh, Ben.
They were walking by sight, not by faith.
Right.
God not going in for them, driving back the points and all this stuff.
Sure. What else? Any others? Sure. Right.
That's always been the case. It always will be. Some people, we've seen bullies in school that really want to do tough.
Right.
They got their hands off. And these people are staring. They're right there at this, looking right at it. And it's real. This could be me.
Sure.
I realize fear is cancer.
Yeah.
Will run through an arc, and that's why when they get keep peeling away, keep peeling away. Not only to get his glory, but also you've got to get that fear out of the regular story.
Sure. I want you to look at verse 32. Hopefully you've got your Bible there handy. Numbers chapter 13 and verse 32. It says, and I just want to look at one term here. It says, and they gave the children of Israel, in the New King James, it says, a bad report of the land. Okay. Now, was there good to report about the land? Of course. Was there bad to report about the land? It's not wide open. They can't just walk in there and just roll up in there and take it. But it said, it emphasizes there that they gave a bad report. I want you to think about that term for just a second. Do we sometimes give a bad report in our church or in our community or dealings with in whatever it would be? Do we sometimes spread a bad report? What are some ways in which we can spread a bad report in the community? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Absolutely. What else? What other ways can we sort of spread a bad report from church? Right. Mm-hmm. So essentially reporting something without all the information or without all the facts, certainly so. What else? Tom. Talking about things we shouldn't be talking about, or maybe don't know enough about. I heard so-and-so at church say to so-and-so at church that so-and-so, and all of a sudden, it's filtered through 3 or 4 or 5 different voices, and you don't know what you've heard, but you told it. Ben?
Complain about this, complain about that. Then they turn, well, I don't know why my people go to church.
Sure. Right. So we had 10 people that came back with a bad report. And then we have 2 people, Caleb and Joshua, that come back with a different report. We're going to look at what Caleb said right there, just above that, actually. It said in verse 30, then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession. And he says, for we are well able, and I want you to look at this word, for we are well able to overcome it. Now, did Caleb and Joshua see anything different than the other 10 spies? No, they all went to the same place. They all saw the same thing. But he said, let's go up there and take it. He says, we are able to overcome it. What does the word overcome mean? Be victorious. Win out. Take over. Overpower. But the word overcome is only used when the presumed inferior group is who wins. Okay? Nobody, if UK came and played Garrett County in basketball this year, nobody would say, boy, Kentucky overcame Garrett last night. I mean, that wouldn't make sense, right? That would, the tallest kid for Garrett County, 6 foot. Kentucky's got 3 7-footers. That wouldn't make sense. You would use the word overcome when you said, we might be the underdog. Now, had Garrett County beat UK, that's a different story. So Caleb is acknowledging here in this verse that, yes, we might be an underdog, to use a sporting term here, but who they have with them makes a big difference, right? What does Caleb's example teach us about standing firm when we're outnumbered? Keep our faith in God. Keep our faith in God. You're going to be outnumbered almost all the time, right? You're always going to be outnumbered. You're almost always going to be outnumbered. But you have God on your side. That helps, right? It may not always work out perfectly in the way that we think it should work out, but we can report a good news report with 30 people there rather than a bad news report, only 30 there, right? We can look at this and say, we can be successful. Let's go a little further. Yeah.
There's a guy in Garrett County in World War II that did that. He had a climb a big cliff. I want to write it. The hardest connect the other day because this guy said he knew all 100 of these people. I looked out from Garrett County. So he got to take up these German camp. And the German said, luckily, and about 40 of them lived through.
Uh-huh.
And the boy, he said, I remember this years ago. He said, we were checked. We were strong, we were young, we were athletic, we were rich, we could do it.
Right.
See that? Most of the boys got on boats of war. They knew that.
Right.
That's what we thought.
Sure.
Caleb showed it. We can do it.
Right.
And that's totally the training and what's got on your side. They have the power they got power on your side.
Turn to Numbers chapter 14. We're going to look at verses 1 through 10. And as we go through this, we've seen sort of the situation. We've addressed the situation. But the people are not going to handle this the way that perhaps they should. I want you to notice there's something that's going to come up, and this train is never late in this story, but I want you to pay attention to something that'll come up here in these verses 14, or Numbers chapter 14, verses 1 through 10. Tom, you here to read these? There's a couple of slides too. Jephunneh. All right. So a couple of things. First of all, we in the first 2 or 3 verses there that Tom read, we see that the people started crying. They started grumbling. They said, they've brought us out of Egypt when we could have died there. That's not the first time we've heard that. This is the first time we hear they could have just let us die in the wilderness. We've not heard that, but we do hear that right now. And then they even said, let's pick a new what? Let's pick a new leader. One of these clowns over here can do better than what these are doing, right? That's the thought that seems to come from them right there. So the whole new plan. And we see that Joshua and Caleb beg the people. They plead with them and they remind them of God's presence. They say, look what this land is, this great place. All of this. Now, I want you to look at the final verse right here. I believe this is verse 10, maybe 9 and 10, but right here on the screen, you'll see it. It says, and all the congregation said to do what? Who's the them here? Joshua and Caleb. So the plan is, well, if they're going to say this, we're going to get rid of them there, as it were. Now, I want us to think about this because we are all guilty of this right here. What does this tell us, reveal about the danger of nostalgia for the old life, both in this story and in the church today? When we talk about nostalgia, we're talking about back when, old stuff. It translates translating Greek back things or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is. I've read it a million times. Can't remember any of it. But nostalgia, when everything was better back then than going forward. What does this reveal about the danger of that? Absolutely could have went back to Egypt. Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. 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 Yeah. Right. They'd forgot about the slavery, right? The slavery seems to have went by the wayside. They misremembered. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Uh-huh. And you and I agree, and she agrees. So now it's all, they didn't take long for it to spin out of control, Ben.
When you're somewhere in a certain age, whatever, period, you don't realize how much better things can be.
Uh-huh.
Like most of us here grew up without everything. If you was lucky, you had a box.
Yep.
If not, you just sit out under shade tree and you just feel it. But now, people that were born later than that, they couldn't imagine what, but it really wasn't that bad. And they're thinking the same thing. Well, it was hard, but really, we didn't have to worry about fighting and dying and
right.
taking over countries and nations.
Right.
Really, it wasn't that bad. They're kind of looking on like that.
But they forgot about how hot they were. The nights you couldn't sleep, and to extend the air conditioner metaphor. How does nostalgia sometimes creep into the church? Mm-hmm. How else? Yep. Right. Sure. Sorry, Jimmy. Yeah. Yeah. No. Right. Sure. Your example there of coming in the door, that may be something that people don't know, but you see a lot of old churches and there's two doors that look exactly the same on the front. That's not a scriptural thing. That's a cultural thing. But sometimes we're nostalgic for cultural things, but culture is eternally changing. It's changing over time. And so we sometimes want to bind those things from, 100 years ago into the church now. And I'm certainly not saying that we shouldn't keep doing the things that are scriptural, but I'd say that your great grandfather would have been surprised by this entire thing that you're looking at right here. And that's just something that changes. Tom? Uh-huh. Sure. Uh-huh. Yep. Right. Ben?
Nostalgia killed a lot of churches because they will not innovate.
Uh-huh.
They will not embrace new things like the Facebook or the PowerPoint.
Sure.
You will find hundreds of people in churches that's only broken. I've heard it to this day.
Yeah.
That's a seat. You can't have that PowerPoint. You got to read. And that nostalgia for things that they was raised up kills a lot of
Sure.
churches.
It can. It absolutely can. Let's go a little bit further. I think what we saw with these people wanting to go back to Egypt, or at least chattering about wanting to go back to Egypt, is that they were, those are my words, but they're saying my fear is greater, and I fear by going back to what it had been. Do we sometimes do that today? How so?
When you're asked to do something new in church,
Mm-hmm.
and you've never done it, you won't grow or won't step into the role.
Right.
I think that's got the same thing.
Can be. Sure. What else? Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
I think we hear a misunderstanding. A lot of people think God is this king sitting up in heaven, and he sees man get out of line one little bit, and he smacks him inside the head. That's not God at all. The Bible says God is our Father, and we are his children. And if we become his little children, we cannot approach him. When we see little him walking around here and visiting people and stuff like that, we love him. We just, he's our baby. Okay? And we love that. That's what God sees us as. We don't need to be afraid to go to daddy or our father and say, God, I'm hurting right now.
Right.
You climb up there. Spencer Presley told me one time we were sitting there in the booth together, and he said, I thought they were kids, they love to come and stick with me out in the store.
Yeah.
Very easy.
Right.
All his life.
Right.
So he's a good guy. So he's a good daddy. And that's what little kids need. I can go talk to daddy.
Right.
I found out I got cancer. I found out my wife is dying. Some of the bad things that happen.
Sure.
I will talk to God because he's there, not as this older that's going to smack his face. He's going to hear you.
Right.
Hebrews 4:16, approach the throne of God boldly. We can do this. I'm going to talk to God about this. And I think we'd be better off if we understood God is not to punish us. God is here to save us.
Right.
I think that's like doing their right when they realize that I cause all things to be together for good to those who know who love the Lord. But if we say, well, I can't do this because I might lose this. God doesn't say it, I'm going to cause everything to work out. But you need to have confidence and faith in God. Yes, it's new, maybe something I've done before. I can step up because God's going to bless.
Sure. I'm going to skip ahead to Numbers 14. We're going to keep going. This is verses 26 through 35. Jill, do you care to read this for us, please, dear? Shafana. Thank you very much. So, as this story continues, we see that God tells them, the unbelieving generation, he said, you'll wander for 40 years. And it's 40 years, which was for what reason? What's the explanation for 40 years? So a year for every day that they went out and explored, that the spies went out and explored. It said only Joshua and Caleb would enter the land, at least people of what age? What was the 20, right? We see that. And in a sense, we go back to what we read at the very beginning in Numbers chapter 13, where they said, you brought us out of Egypt, and we'd like to go back to Egypt and die. And they said, you brought us out to the wilderness, through the wilderness, we'd like to go back to the wilderness and die. And essentially, that's what they get. That's what they would get. I think it's a harsh but fair use of the word twice, carcasses, right here. There's not a lot of glory. You know, when we go to the funeral home, we don't talk about how good the carcass looked in the front, right? Although I do think that, I will say, as a person younger than most of you all, the way that we sometimes do talk about people laying in the coffin is a little bit odd. Because, oh, he looked good. Well, he looked dead. But he did look, he was there. But we don't use the word carcass very often. But what do we use the word carcass for? Animals that do what? Fall over and die, right? How many of you have ever seen a dead animal on the side of the road or out in the field? It's not a real pretty sight, right? I'm seeing this and I'm saying, what are these people going to look like? Not a great look of those people right there. They're just laying there to the side, as it were. So I think the use of that word is kind of fitting for this. So how does the passage here, what we read, this 10 verses, show the seriousness of both unbelief and complaining? And those are two different things. Let's do unbelief first. What's the seriousness of unbelief? Okay, no faith. How else is unbelief a serious issue? They do end up dying as a result of it. And what kind of death would we have because of unbelief? Because we're all going to die. But what kind of death would unbelief bring to us? Be lost, eternally lost, right? The second death there. And so it seems to me that unbelief is a big problem. But y'all already agreed with that. What about this one? Do we rank these two things as the same, unbelief and complaining? Do we in real life? Not usually, right? We would say unbelief is bad. A little complaining will work every now and then, right? But it seems like they get in trouble for doing what? For complaining. It was a lack of appreciation. It certainly was. They complained about, I'm sorry, Mel, go ahead. And a lack of trust. And it's the same thing over and over and over again, right? We keep seeing it over and over again. And it almost feels like this is God saying, like, this is enough. You've complained the whole way. Dad or Tom, somebody raise your hand. Uh-huh. Right. Sure. So it's a good comment, because it actually kind of funnels us into the question: in what ways do our words sometimes reflect both faith and or fear? And the example that Dad gave right there is maybe a lack of words. It just kind of, well, Ben said it, so he seems pretty smart. I'm just going to go along with him right there. How does that sometimes happen for us even today? Our words reflect our faith or our fear.
God has said that He has put all positions of authority in place. The president, all the elders, God has set them in there. And when we complain about it, we're telling God, you messed up. You know what you do. You put these people over authority over you, but they don't allow authority over you. I don't like it.
Others?
I remember the story that guy was preaching, he was preaching to God, and they said the woman stood up and cried out to the church, and started saying, stand up, and it was awful, a lot of people standing up, saying, she was reflecting her preach, or she didn't beat the person up, she didn't threaten, but she stood up and started saying, stand up, and it was I think sometimes we can stand up for Jesus, stand up for our faith. Just because the world says do this, do this, do this.
Sure. Somebody's eating something up here that's apple flavored. The Winterman. I smelled something. I can't. It's like no, I don't. But it smells really good. I thought it smelled like an apple Jolly Rancher up here. So I lost those last 2 points. All I could smell was what I thought I smelled over here. So we see that God put a line there and said above 20 and under 20. I think Alan actually mentioned something about this maybe last week about accountability. And this was a hard number right here. And I think it would be hard to say, well, if your kid went along with you or didn't go along with, but essentially what this number does is it makes a delineation between people who should have known better, maybe people who didn't know better, as it were. But we have that same thing with children today. How do we encourage faith in future generations, in kids, in little ones, so as to avoid the mistake of Israel? How do we encourage our children? It's probably not going to be. It probably can't be stronger than ours if ours isn't very weak, isn't very good. That's a good point. What else?
Sharing your failures, your weaknesses, where you went wrong, what kind of it. I mean, God, when He wrote the Bible, He didn't just write the good stuff. He wrote the bad
Sure.
stuff. People messed up. We need to do that too. We need to own up to our mistakes. You won't mess up. This is what you need to do.
I think that's really good. Growing up, one of the things that before we were able to drive, Dad, especially, but Dad, not much Mom, but Dad would tell us about times when he drove and he made mistakes or he faced if I had done this or done that or done that. And sometimes when people tell you stories, you think he's one ear and out the other, but there are things that I remembered because it wouldn't have made sense for Dad to have said, I'm the best driver of all time. I've never made a driving mistake and I can just do anything. Because the first time I got behind the wheel, what would I have thought? I could do anything. This is easy, right? Well, it might have been easier for Dad when he was 40 than it was when he was 16, but I'm 16. And so his willingness to say, one time I came around this curve and I was in the wrong lane and we just about had a wreck. Well, he tells me that. So the next time I go around a curve, what do I need to do? I remember where I need to slow down, where I need to be. And so we can take that, and that's not a religious example, but that's an example of teaching that we can apply as we go forward. We do the same thing with children, our own children, but children in the classroom as well, is that we teach them lessons that are meant and designed to strengthen their faith, right? The little kids in the very back, they get told the story of Noah's Ark, right? They're not going to go out and build a boat. What's the lesson for a little kid? Listen to God, do what God says, right? That's the lesson that the 2-year-old needs. The lesson changes when they're 8 and when they're 15 and when they're 40 and when they're 90. Those change over time. But we have to listen to what God says. The people of Israel did not do a great job of that, and they were punished as a result. Let's finish up. Numbers 14. This is 36 through the end of the chapter, verse 45. Tony, you want to read this one? Lesson learned, right? All the men who came back with the bad report, right? So they were punished right then and there. And the people mourned, as obviously they would, of their loved ones, their tribe representative who had went out. They mourned that death. But then they decide, well, we're going to go up and fight, right? Have they been told to do this? This is not what, but they said, you know what? We're going to go and do it. Did it work out? Moses warned them, right? It said not to do it, but they went and fought. They went and fought, and it said they went and the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in that mountain came down and attacked them and drove them back as far as Hormon. I don't know where Hormon has to be, but I think the point is valid right here that they got beat back pretty good. Still didn't learn. Why was Israel's attempt to go up after God's judgment still disobedient? And I want you to, before you answer that, they've been told they can be victorious, right? God's with them. But why was this effort still disobedient? Exactly. Their heart maybe was in the right place here, maybe, but their execution was not effective at all. It was wrong. Ben's example of communion is a really good one right there. You know, if I came in and said, I'm going to take communion on Tuesday, well, the Bible tells me to do it. Yeah, I mean, I should do it, but I've got to do it on God's time. And their success should have been all 12 spies come back and say, yes, we can do it. You know, God gets them in a huddle and says, all right, break, let's go do it. And then they go do it, right? That's not what happened. They come back, they're fussing, they're wanting to kill people, they're wanting to stone people, all of that. Moses had warned them it doesn't work out. So they follow, they were still disobedient there in the judgment. What's the difference in acting in faith and acting presumptuously? What does it mean to presume? So we do kind of make up our own rules. Well, this is probably what God would want, right? Yeah, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. We do this in our own life, right? The boss would probably want me to go ahead and do this, right? My wife, she would probably want me to go ahead, and do this. When we act presumptuously, what's supporting us? Ourselves. Not much, right? Kind of hoping, well, maybe it'll work out, right? But it's not going to be very effective. What's acting in faith? Believing, trusting God in what God had told us. And so our last question to finish up tonight, how can we ensure that our obedience is both timely but also led by the Spirit? That we do what we're supposed to do at the right time, but also by the Word of God. Right. Sure.
I think you take what you want to do and you look and say, okay, does the Bible authorize it first? If the Bible doesn't authorize it, God will do it. Then you look, okay, why do I want to do it? What's my motive behind it? Is it glorify God, does it keep him, or just greed or whatever?
Right.
If you go through there and do all of that, I think that will keep you on the right.
Yeah. It may seem like the people there at the end of the story kind of wanted to prove God wrong, right? They kind of want to get in God's graces. We can do this and you'll be proud of us, but that was not what was asked of them there at all. We'll continue with this evening. I appreciate your all's comments and questions and answers and all of that. Like Caleb and Joshua, we have to see challenges through the power of God, not through our weakness, right? We look at things and we say, well, I can't do that, right? I can't do that. but we've promised that God would be with us. But we almost immediately forget that when we think about what we can or can't do. It's what I can do. I'm strong enough or not strong enough to do this or that. And so what tends to happen is that we then start grumbling a little bit. This is going to be too hard. This is going to be too difficult. We've completely forgotten that God's with us, but we are immediately going to say, well, I can't do this or I can't do that. Well, when I say I can't do it, what will that do to my faith? What's going to weaken it, right? Wherever my faith level was, if I say, well, I can't do that, and I've already forgotten that God's with me, faith level is going to drop a little bit. Right? Well, if my faith is here and not up here, then I probably can't do it, right? I'm letting that sort of drain down, as it were. And so just as from the beginning, we have to stand on the promises of God, right? We're going to sing that song right here. And when we stand on promises, it may not always go well. There is no point in this story where it says, had the children of Israel went into the Canaan land, they would have fought and they would have killed everybody. And we don't ever even get to that, right? They just looked at it and said, it's way too big. We can't do it. They had no idea what they were even capable of doing because they had forgotten the promises that God had delivered over and over and over again. And I don't know how that we can keep talking about this, because we do every Wednesday night, that they seem to forget. But maybe it's a good lesson for us, because I think we quite often forget those things as well. If there's anything that we can do for you,